It's time for us to begin this morning for our Bible class. We're glad that you are with us as we begin this Sunday morning in this second half of a quarter, or the 8th, 13th of a quarter, or whatever this happens to be. We are involved in a series in this quarter, the one that runs from December through February, on addictions and social media. As we've mentioned for some time, we are sort of doing two mini quarters. These aren't meant to be two separate classes, but they kind of are. I guess that's the best way of putting it. And we are beginning the second part of that this morning. We're talking about the Christian and social media. And some people, as I said last week, I want to just... Oops, I thought I had another slide in there. I don't. Some people may think this is something that, is not for them at all. I don't have social media, or I don't even have a computer. I don't even know how to turn one on. I've heard all that stuff before. Anytime I've talked about anything technology related, and that's fine. You may, if nothing else, you get a 6-week nap. How about that? But in reality, even if you don't do anything computer-wise, or you don't do anything social media-wise, this is still something that affects pretty well all of us, for a couple of reasons. One is because, as we said last week, just as we were kind of reminding ourselves of where we're going, social media is just a form of communication. And so while we're going to have, obviously, some very specific examples and illustrations and all of that, by way of application, so many of these things are going to be true of just day-to-day conversation, face-to-face, on the phone, texting, whatever, email, whatever, not just when I log on to certain websites or mobile apps, and that's going to be all we're talking about. The other reason is because even if you do not involve yourself in social media, even if you hate social media, and if you say, I'm never going to get one of them accounts, whatever, you know people who do. I guarantee it. You may think you know no one who is on social media, which means you've never met another human being. They are. And we're going to get into some statistics in a few minutes that show just how amazingly prevalent this has become in our world. So even if you think, I'm just here because, I want to check my box, or I'm just here to see faces and I don't really care about the subjects, please don't tell me that. But even if that's kind of your mindset, there are still going to be some things that all of us need to either have just for communication-wise, or when we interact with people who do have social media. Because let's just be honest, we're going to get to this in just a second. I'll say this again in just a couple of moments. It's not right or wrong. It just is a thing. And so if we walk up to someone, the first thing we say is, I hate social media. Well, you probably just shut them off from any good conversation if they really enjoy it for some reason. And so we need to have at least some information where we can have an intelligent conversation about things without just acting like it's the worst thing that's ever happened. I want to give just some underlying facts that are going to really underline some things we're going to talk about really for the course of this entire quarter. One is simply this: because it is called social media, it reminds us that we are created to be social creatures. Let's just be really honest with ourselves. For about the last 10 and a half months, isn't that one of the things we've missed, even if we're very introverted? I mean, I tell people sometimes I'm an introverted person. I don't believe it. Though I think, why do you preach if you hate people? That's not... Introversion doesn't mean you hate people. Introversion means people drain you of your energy. Being around people makes you tired instead of building you up. And even people like me who are... I'll be honest with you. On Sundays when we have 2 services, I am exhausted on Sunday night. Not just from the preaching, but from talking to you folks for so much. I love every second of it, but it's exhausting. But even people who are very introverted have said over the last few months how much they miss just interaction, even if it's not deep and all that sort of stuff. And because we call this social media, it reminds us that we are created to be social creatures. And I know that the verse that I have referenced on the screens is dealing specifically with God creating woman in the Garden of Eden, but the principle of it is not good for the man to be alone is really true across the board. And that's one of the reasons why the Bible talks a lot about marriage and family. It's also why the Bible talks a lot about things like friendships and the church, obviously, in the New Testament, but nations and other just social groups, because we are meant to be social people. Try living your life for a few weeks with zero human interaction and see how that goes for you. I mean, why is it that one of the main punishments a culture can give someone besides the death penalty is to be in isolation? Because we need to be around other people for all kinds of reasons. For our own mental health, for economic reasons, and on the list goes. And so we're talking about something that affects us at a very need-based level. We are meant to be social creatures. Also, just by way of an underlying concept, as I said a few minutes ago, this is where it's going to come up again, is that all that social media is a form of communication. And I say that because some people hear the phrase social media, or they hear a specific social media platform, Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever, and they automatically think that's evil. No, it's a thing. It's a thing. All it is a form of communication. Now, we may disagree with how it's presented or what's done on it, but it's not good or bad in and of itself. The example that's so often used is money. Is money good or bad? No. It depends on how you use it. I can take the same $10 bill and give it to someone in need, or give it to a charity that's in need, or I can take that $10 bill and gamble on it and rip somebody off. I could do the same thing, or buy something that harms someone. I could do the same, two completely different things, and the money itself was not good or bad, it's how it was used. And the same is true really with any form of communication. Is the telephone good or bad? Yes or no, depending on how it's used. Is radio good or bad? It depends on what's on there and what I'm allowing to listen to. And on we could go. And the same is true with social media. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is. It's a thing. And so how we use it, or what we allow to come through it into our hearts and minds, is what matters. And some of you are going to shrink back from the next one, but you're going to see why I say this. The other underlying fact, and really why we're studying this, is it is here to stay. If you don't believe me, everybody in the world seemed to get mad at Facebook over the last 2 weeks, and where did they go? To another social media platform. I hate Facebook so much, I'm going over to this one. Well, what'd you just prove? Social media is here to stay. I mean, I like it, but here it is. And it may not have, all right. Does anybody remember Friendster? Does that name ring a bell to anyone? Friendster was one of the first social media platforms that was out there. It predates Facebook. There was social media before Facebook. About 12 people were on it, but there it was. But people didn't like it, so they ran to this thing that was then called the Facebook. And now the numbers on Facebook are staggering. People get mad at that. Where do they go? Another social media platform. And on it goes. It is here to stay. The names may change, or the companies may change, the platforms may change, but it is here to stay. Just raise your hand if you have one of these, a smartphone. I know we've got another room. And all right, pretty much everyone has some form of a smartphone. Not everyone, but most people do. Now, I know this is not a social media statistic. This is just a technology statistic. But did you realize that we check our smartphones every 4.3 minutes that we're awake? That's not me making it up. That's a study that was done about 3 years ago. That every 4.3 minutes we are awake, we check our smartphones for some reason. By the way, that comes out to 81,500 times per year. And it also means that while I'm teaching, those of you who have a smartphone will check it 10.5 times. Please don't do that. But notice it says while we're awake. Sometimes I don't check my smartphone the whole time I'm at work. And I leave it on a shelf somewhere. I have to. I can't check it while I'm at work. Teachers probably can't do that much while they're at work. Check their smartphone. Others who just can't. This is still a true statistic. From the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, we're going to make up for it somehow. And a lot of what we're doing involves social media. Let me give you just some other statistics about all of this that come under that concept, because it just reminds us of how a huge, what a huge part this is. One writer talking about Facebook specifically, because we check Facebook on our phones a whole lot, said this, and this ties back to our last quarter. And this was a psychologist at Cal State University Fullerton who said Facebook users have the ability to control their behavior, but they don't have the motivation to control this behavior because they don't see the consequences as that severe. In other words, yeah, I could stop you. I could stop checking it, but it's not that big of a deal. And then how many of us find ourselves just mad at the end of the day because we checked Facebook 74 times? Or we find ourselves going, man, I didn't get a whole lot done today. But I sure know what 700 of my friends are doing elsewhere in Europe that really is going to change my life. There are consequences. One of the consequences is simply that we are what one writer called addicted to distraction. We're going to talk about this a lot over the next 6 weeks, the idea of just being distracted. And this person's name is Tony Rinke. And he said that when we do these, not just Facebook, he's talking about just taking our smartphones and the apps and things over and over and over and over and over again. He's saying what it really does is it fulfills a need, and he puts that in quotes, I don't, for distraction from several things. One, it keeps work away. I mean, if I'm checking my phone, I'm not working. And maybe I really don't like this part of my job, or I really don't want to complete that task, so what do? Well, let's see what everybody's doing today. And when that's done, then I feel like I've accomplished something. All I've really done is put off my work. Another need, again, his quotes, is that it keeps people away. I don't really like interacting with people in person, so I'll just check in them online. And that's good enough. Now, there is a good side to all of this because I can keep up with people. But if I'm doing that to keep people always at arm's length and never see people face to face or never deeply interact with people, that's a problem. If I'm using it as a way to keep people away from me so I don't really have to deepen a relationship or work through a struggle or whatever it happens to be, then that's a problem. And then he also says that a lot of people do this at a sort of a psychological level to keep thoughts of eternity away. If all I'm focused on is what's going on in the world right here and now, every second of every day, guess what I'm not thinking about? What's going to happen when this life is over? I don't have to think about that. I've got to worry about what's happening everywhere in the world this very second. I didn't put this in the notes, and it's probably going to come up again in 2 or 3 weeks. I'm going to say it now, frankly, in case I forget. But one of the things that Leah often talks about, and she's kind of the one that brought it to my attention, and I've really paid attention to it, because she brought it up years ago, and I've really paid attention to it since then. It's remarkable. It is because we have not just social media, but if we have one of these, and we've got news from around the world immediately at our fingertips. And what she brought to my mind was, were we really meant to know and care about all of that? Now you say, well, care, maybe. But put yourself in someone's shoes 200 years ago, before really any mass media was available except for the printing press. If there was an earthquake in Southeast Asia, did someone in New York City or Paducah, Kentucky ever know it happened? If they did, it might have been weeks later. And that's if they knew. Now, in some ways, it's good that we know. In some ways. Because I know there's a tragedy. I know I can pray for that. Or I might see, I may have friends there that, went to college with or whatever. So in some ways, it's good. But if we know all of that all the time, were we even made to carry that much information and that much weight on our shoulders all the time? And I'm not sure we were. When we know we should care, but were we even meant to know constantly every last negative thing that happens on the entire face of the earth 24 hours a day? It's an interesting thing to think about. And sometimes we just scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll to keep up with what's going on in the immediate moment, instead of, let's think about eternal matters. Let's think about heavenly matters. Some other statistics. You think you don't know someone who has social media? 45% of every person on the face of the earth doesn't just have an account, but is an active user of some social media platform. That's every person on earth. That includes children. 45% of every person on the face of this planet is an active user of some social media platform. It may not be Facebook or Twitter. It may be something from a different country. But just under half, it's about 3.8 billion people. And by the way, think about how many people in the world don't even have the internet. And still this number is true. Or for sure don't have things like high-speed internet like we do, or wireless internet like we do, and still this number is true. And you think, well, all I do is scroll a few times a day. Did you realize the average user spends 3 hours a day on social media? That's the average. That includes people, by the way, who have an account and never check it. That's the average of every user, even ones who have accounts they don't check. The average is 3 hours. I just wonder if there might be some better ways we could spend, 2 hours and 59 minutes of that at some point. 79% of all Americans have a social media account. And as you see on the screens, in 2008, that was a grand total of 10%. Now, some of that is there are newer social media platforms since then. That's some of it. Some of it is because of the growth of smartphones. I mean, I asked you to hold up your hand if you have one. Think about in 2008, if I'd asked that same, who has a smartphone? Probably like maybe a third to a half of the room, probably, that has a smartphone. Now, a lot of us had cell phones, but not necessarily smartphones. Now they're pretty well universal. Not everyone has one, but most people do. And so that's some of it. That because we can have it with us all the time and check it all the time, we just do. Why not? I mean, we stand in line at Walmart anyway. Why not check Facebook while I'm standing there, right? But 3 hours a day, and 79% of people have an account. That's up from 10% just a few years ago. All right, let's get into some principles here. I'll tell you what. Can I give you some other statistics? I spent the time looking these up, so yes, I can. Let me give you some specific statistics about different things. Every 30 days, so basically once a month, 48.2% of baby boomers, 77.5% of Gen Xers, that's me, we're the forgotten generation. You boomers and you millennials, I love watching you fight. We're just in the middle of Gen Xers going, ha ha, we still exist. Just keep duking it out there, it's great. And 90.4% of millennials use social media every 30 days. 91% of all social media access is done on these. That's why I say we check our phones so many times. Only 9% of social media access is done actually on computers. 91% is done on these. 80% of the time we spend on social media is on these. Which tells us a couple things. One, we're spending a lot of time, but it actually says those who check it on computers, which is a smaller number, are staying on longer because they don't have to go anywhere. If you're on your phone in Walmart line, eventually you're going to get to check out. Now, it might take a while, but you're going to get to check out eventually. But if you're on your computer, I could sit there for hour after hour after hour and just keep looking at it and keep scrolling and keep doing all sorts of things. Every single day, 74% of Facebook users check in. 61% of Snapchat users use it. 63% of Instagram users either post or check every single day. 42% of people who have Twitter check in every day. And people who have a YouTube account look at least one video. Or 51% of people who have a YouTube account check at least one video a day. By the way, a lot of people don't think YouTube is a social media account. Then why are there comments? Of course it's a social media account. Because I can interact with people and subscribe to certain channels and interact with them. If you don't think YouTube's a big deal, by the way, over 500 billion videos are viewed every single day. And those total over 1 billion hours. If Leo's the math teacher here, but that's over 114,155 years of videos that are viewed every day on YouTube. And we're not wasting time. 400 hours of new video are uploaded every single minute. Over 1 billion people are on Instagram now. Over 500 million of those are on every single day. 60% of people say they find out the new products through Instagram. So if you run a small business, be on Instagram. Okay, just telling you, there's your business lesson for the day. If you're on Snapchat, 60% of users are under 25. It's interesting that's actually down from 73% just 5 years ago. 47% of by the way, some of us here that all the kids are on Snapchat and none are on Facebook. Only 47% of teenagers think Snapchat is better than Facebook. 53% think Facebook is better. So we're not being told the truth. 22% of all users on Twitter are in the United States. 80% are from other countries. Obviously, that's the math. What was it? Oh yeah, Facebook. The average user on Facebook spends more than 1,000 minutes per month on there, and the average person on Facebook, just Facebook, checks their account over 5 times a day, and that includes all accounts, including those who are basically never on there. Because, the world changed since 12 minutes ago, so I've got to check again. I've got to make sure that nobody uploaded a new picture of their grandkids since 6 minutes ago. Because if I miss that, then the world will fall apart. It is remarkable how much time we spend. Now, is all of it bad? No, it's not. Think about, and I'm tying smartphones with this for obvious reasons because, as I said, that's where most of us spend it. I want to read to you something that one writer said about it. He was talking about that thing where we check our phones 81,500 times a year. And he wrote this. He said, the impulse is not hard to understand. Our lives are consolidated on our phones. Our calendars, our cameras, our pictures, our work, our workouts, our reading, our writing, our credit cards, our maps, our news, our weather, our email, our shopping. All of it can be managed with state-of-the-art apps and powerful little devices we carry everywhere. Now listen to this. Even the GPS app on my phone, which guided me to a new coffee shop today, possesses 30,000 times the processing speed of the 70-pound onboard navigational computer that guided Apollo 11 to the surface of the moon. If you have one of these that's halfway new, what he's saying is just the GPS app processes 30,000 times faster than the computer on the Apollo 11 that went to the moon. Now that's remarkable. That's not good or bad. That's amazing. But it doesn't surprise us then that everything we do, if I were to ask you how many of you bought something, from some particular shopping website from this thing before Christmas, most of us probably say, I may not have bought it, but I looked for it. I researched on it. When Lee and I, we still do this some. We didn't do as much this year or 2020 because, it was 2020. We lived especially in Nashville and Alabama. When we go Christmas shopping, that's what we did. We would go shopping and we'd be standing. Remember Toys R Us? Remember that store? We'd be standing in Toys R Us looking at some toy for our little kids, and I'd be on Amazon going, it's cheaper there, put it in the cart. Or it's cheaper here at Toys R Us, go ahead and put it in that cart. It was amazing because we were able just to see in 2 seconds where we could get it for less money and either bring it home that night or have it in the mail in 2 days. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's remarkable. Now let's get to some things about some good and bad. I know I haven't read many Bible verses, but these are going to be some principles that we are going to use as going throughout this class that are biblical principles. Some are good and some are bad. Here's one principle. Sharing information is not new. If you don't believe me, have you read your Bible lately? That is sharing information. Sharing information is nothing new. Social media is just how so much of it is done today. I hear people sometimes talk about how I can't stand how we get our news on social media. Whatever happened to watching good old evening television? Is that not still sharing news and sharing information? Of course it is. Of course it is. It's just a different way of doing something people have done since the beginning of time, where they get together or where they somehow share information. Folks, if it wasn't for sharing information, we wouldn't have a vast majority of our New Testament, because what's it written in? Letters that were sent to congregations or even individuals. 1st, 2nd Timothy, Titus, Philemon. So you have even letters from one person to another, sharing information, obviously inspired, but that were given to us that remind us that sharing information is nothing new. So how it's done changes. But that it's done will never change. The fact that we share information is something that simply will never change, and it shouldn't ever change. We need to be people who share information. But one of the things that is good and bad, and notice how I said that, is good and bad about social media. Some people like the idea, some people don't like the idea. That there aren't, to use kind of the term you hear sometimes, gatekeepers. In other words, when you turn on the evening news, whatever network it is, I don't care. Someone, or really someones, have decided which stories are going to make it on the news in that 30-minute program, or if you watch one of the 24-hour networks, I don't care which one it is, someone is deciding behind the scenes what stories are going to be shown in the next hour, and they're deciding who is going to be interviewed to tell a particular angle of that story and how it's going to be presented. And that's neither good nor bad. It's just the way it is. The same is true in newspaper articles, and the same is true on websites that present the news. They decide here are the news stories, especially that make the home page of the website or that make the front page of the newspaper. They make those decisions. They are the gatekeepers. And so some people like the idea that in social media, I'm the gatekeeper. I get to choose who I follow on social media, what people, what news organizations, what sports teams, whatever it is. So I get to decide what information comes before my eyes. And some people then don't like that. Because what if I'm following things that aren't true? Or that only tell one side of the story? And so one of the principles that we have to keep in mind is that because we, or I, am the gatekeeper, I have to be more discerning than ever before in a whole lot of areas. Now, we need to be discerning no matter how we take in news and information. If I sit down and watch the evening news every night, which I don't, but if I did, I would need to not just, blindly listen. Just whatever they say, sure, whatever. And because it's on this network, then it must be right. No, not necessarily. And especially from a biblical or a moral standpoint. I really need to be listening for, is this not just true, but is it biblically true? Is it presenting the full story? Is it presenting the true morality? Is it presenting the worldview that God would have me to look at the world through? But when it comes to social media, because I get to choose what's coming before my eyes, I can choose a worldview, frankly, that's completely false if I want to. Or I can only choose to listen to people who are on my side of a particular issue or story and never listen to the other side. And for sure never interact. Who would hate to do that? And lose the ability to really think through issues. Because all I'm seeing is what I want to see because I already thought it was true. Can we not see how that's really dangerous? And I'm just going to say it. Can we not also see how then we look at America, why are we so divided? Well, I wonder why. Because every time we log on to Facebook or Twitter, all I'm looking for is what I already think is true. Instead of trying to understand and interact and learn and grow and teach. And if people on quote-unquote the other side are doing the same thing, then what happens? We go further and further and further apart into echo chambers. And I can't believe anybody would ever think that. Well, guess what? They think the same thing about me. And there's no crossing of that bridge to try to understand and grow. And further, I can begin to just believe things that aren't even true. Just because I like them. And because this person or this organization puts it out, well then it must be right. Not necessarily. Those are people too. And they make mistakes. And they may not have the same worldview that I have. For sure not a biblical worldview. And so we have to be super careful about, because basically, again, we are the gatekeepers, making sure that we have that discerning mindset. Here's one principle, and this is kind of scattershot as far as where we're going this morning, because what I'm hoping to do is take these things and just kind of begin to round them into place over the next few weeks. Here's a principle that deals with young people. And I know our 10th through 12th graders are in this class, and so they may be offended, but let me give a chance to explain this. There's a principle a lot of people have been talking about lately, that because of social media, and really because of just media in general, but especially social media, that young people are maturing both faster and slower than ever before. Now here's what they mean by that. They are maturing faster in that because of the things they see, they're, to use an old phrase, losing their innocence faster. They're seeing sexual things a whole lot younger. They're seeing the negative in the world a whole lot younger. They're seeing that people aren't always who they say they are a whole lot younger. And they're losing that beautiful innocence that we know at some point they're going to realize, this world isn't perfect. But a whole lot younger, they're seeing things that just strip them of that pure innocence, again, sexually, but also just in the view of the world. And it often grows into this just cynicism that the world's just terrible. And everything's terrible. And everybody's out to get you. Why is it, do you think, that one of the major... I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not saying this stuff is wrong, but it is a little bit frightening as popular as it is. But why is it, do you think, that one of the major things that sells to young people as far as novels and movies and that world is stories of the anti-hero, the dystopian, where it's just dark and brooding and where the bad guy is actually the good guy? And kids that are like 8 and 9 and 10, 11-year-old are eating that stuff up. It's because they've already seen it. That's the way they're seeing the world, is in this uninnocent way at very young ages. But then also, the same people turn around and say that because of things like social media and other things, that young people are maturing slower than ever before. And what they mean by that is they have a lot of... Look, they're not dumb, okay? I mean, they can do things on their phones and computers that blow me away. It's remarkable. But then when it comes to quote-unquote life skills, or the ability to be independent, is coming slower and slower and slower and later and later and later in life. Now, again, I'm not saying this is not meant to be a negative statement at all, so please don't hear it that way. But a lot of you in here remember when not all that long ago, a great number, it may even be all, but a great number of insurance companies raised the age at which children could be on their parents' insurance to 26 years old. It used to be 18, then it became, I think it was 21 or 2 somewhere. Now it's 26 on a lot of insurance companies. Again, that's not here nor there, but it's because insurance companies saw that young people were staying at home because they, quote-unquote, couldn't be independent for a long time. Now, again, that's not just because of social media. There are economic standards, there's all kinds of stuff that plays into that. But some of it's because they spend so much time interacting like this that they do not learn how to have a job interview, or to really interact with a department at work, or maybe at a young age to be the boss and have to tell someone, you're fired, or you're not doing your job. They've never learned how to do that. And so they just don't. And so there's a coping that is just not there. Now again, not all of this is necessarily completely good or bad, but it ties to this online world that we create, much of it through social media. One of the positives and negatives of social media is simply the fact of information flowing freely. 62% of Americans, so just shy of 2/3, tell you they get their news from social media. They don't watch evening news. They don't watch Fox News or MSNBC or CNN or whatever. Constantly they might watch it for special events or something like that. Maybe they watched the inauguration a few days ago or the election results or something like that. But as far as just their regular consuming of the news, they're not going to sit down and watch a 24-hour news channel or the evening news or something like that. But 62% get their news from social media. They don't even go to the homepage of fillintheblank.com, newswebsite.com. Whatever I follow on Facebook or Twitter, that's my news. 3 and 5, 62%. That's where they get their news. Now, that's not necessarily a good or bad thing. But as we said earlier, because I'm the gatekeeper, I get to choose which information I see. So guess what I'm going to follow? What I already agree with. I'm not going to sit down and listen to the other side because those people are just wrong. All they ever tell is just not true. All they ever tell is not true. When they said good evening, were they lying? Okay, I mean, it's remarkable how broad of a statement we'll put out there. It's not a good evening. Whatever. The information flows and that's good, but we sometimes only listen to what we want to. Now, we also need to understand that as churches, as God's people, it allows us to reach out. How many people are watching right now live on social media? A lot of you have, who are starting to come back, have been doing that for what feels like 100 years now. For about the last, 10 and a half months, it's been a way for us to reach out, and that's wonderful. And we share other things on social media, and that's great. A huge number. I looked up several things, and I couldn't find a number I was satisfied with because they were so different. I mean, in other words, it wasn't like 80% and 81%. It was everything from about 75 to 90. That's too wide of a range for me to trust. But a huge number of people who have filled out different surveys or been involved in different surveys said that before they ever came into a house of worship, they visited not the website, the Facebook page. What are they sharing on Facebook? What kind of lessons? What kind of information are they sharing? Is it something I can easily find their building or at least their address through social media? That sort of thing. Huge numbers. And so it's a way for us to reach out. But it also, as we've seen, as many of us have seen, it sometimes begins to make us think that virtual is the same as together. Now, if you're watching online right now, we understand that. But one of the things we have got to be guarding against as hopefully things begin to lighten up is, have I replaced together with virtual? It's a wonderful stand-in for when it needs to be. And it has been for the last 10 months. And it's going to be for some people in various times of life going forward. Maybe they're sick in the future for some reason, or they're taking care of someone who's sick or whatever. But for some, it's just become easier. And the church is meant to be together. And so it's a wonderful tool, but it cannot replace being together. And so we've got to make sure of this. Okay, I'm going to say it. The next principle is we often are compelled to share everything with the world. I want you to look. I'm going to take these out of order. I want you to look to Proverbs 13:3. This is supposed to be a Bible class. We haven't read a verse yet. We've used a lot of principles. I don't know how many times I've read through the Bible, or read through Proverbs and everything, but I had never really put this verse with the subject of social media until I was getting this class together. And I'm serious. I am very tempted to have this verse taped to the top of my computer. Very tempted. If I didn't have a webcam on top, I probably would. That would be really good. My Sunday night sermons were just black because it's a piece of paper over the top of it. Look at Proverbs 13:3. Whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. He who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. Can I put that in 2021 sort of tech language? If I'm sharing everything all the time, it's going to bring me down. Because either I'm going to say something that's just completely wrong, or I'm going to annoy the fire out of people that I'm trying to reach with the gospel. What makes my life so interesting that I think everybody should care about everything that I'm doing and everything I feel and think about every last little detail of every subject on the face of the earth? And yet because I can sit behind a computer or on my phone real quick and leave comments and share stuff all the time, all of a sudden I think everybody needs to care about what I think about everything. No, they don't. And I'm as guilty as anybody else. But if I were to ask for a show of hands, and I'm not, but if I were to ask for a show of hands of how many people have a social media account and have posted something like that and later regret it, I pretty much guarantee every hand would go up. I got so mad, I can't believe it. And a few minutes later you thought, why did I say that? Did I really change anything? No, I just made somebody more angry or more upset, or I might even said something untrue. I might have closed the door for evangelism. I'm not saying never share anything. Most of you know I use social media a lot. But I'm not going to say it now, I'm going to say it again. There are some subjects that I literally refuse to post about on social media. There are two specifically. One of them is sports. You want to know why? It's because we lived in Alabama. It was so 50-50 for two schools, and I wasn't a fan of either one of them. And I thought if I say anything, I'm going to turn half my audience off on Sunday morning. So I don't post anything about sports whatsoever. And you probably can guess the other one. Politics. I don't say a word. I had someone, and I know they're watching, and I won't use the politician's name, but I had someone who's a member here come up to me one time, I don't know how long ago it was, a year or so, that said something about how they, meaning the media, sure don't like us fill-in-the-blank supporters. And they pointed at me. I said, I didn't say it, but I'm thinking is, how do you know I support that particular politician? Because would you like to know the full list of every person I've ever told who I voted for in any presidential election? Leah. That's the full list. I don't talk about it. Now, is it important? Yeah, it's important. But if I get on social media and hammer away at this party or this politician, that politician, guess what I've just done? I've just closed off half the world, to half of America, to me ever evangelizing. More than likely. Because they know how I feel about donkeys and elephants, but don't know how I feel about the Lamb of God. I'm not saying we should never do it. I'm not saying that. I've chosen not to. Because I know myself. And I know if I get in one of those Facebook comment wars, only the Lord lost. Because I'm going to say something that's either not true, or in a way that could be taken very much the wrong way, or maybe could be taken in the right way, and that wouldn't be good either with the way I'm in it. And also when we share, I took these out of order. When we share everything on social media, it leads to a lack of privacy of our own choosing. I'm wanting the whole world to know where I am all the time. Do I really want that? And we talk about, privacy issues behind the companies. I just thought about a green chair, and all of a sudden there's all these Facebook ads for green chairs. How do they know that stuff, right? Of course they know. It's not hard. But I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm talking about the fact that I choose to put out there things that nobody else should ever know, other than maybe my wife or my family or or the church, and I just put them out there for everybody to see. Why would I choose? Why do I think I'm that important? I tell you, you study social media, it's gonna humble you real quick. I'm sorry, I'm just not that important, especially as it relates to the whole world. Quickly, I know the first bell rang. Another principle is that we have a lot of relationships, but they're cheaper. They're Facebook friends. How many of them do you actually know? I've got Facebook friends I've never met. And I never will meet, except hopefully in heaven. Now, why I call them friends? Because that's what they're friends. We're Facebook friends. No, you're not. You don't have a clue who they are. But also think about how cheap the relationship is when I can unfriend them and there's no ramification whatsoever. None. Now, if you had someone that you went to school with or worked with or whatever, and you quote-unquote unfriended them, there's going to be some ramifications that, aren't there? There's going to be some things to work through, or some really hurt feelings, or some very strong emotions. You unfriend someone on Facebook and never think a thing in the world about it. It's cheap relationship. It's not bad, but it's cheap. And we've got to put it in its place. A writer named Sherry Turkle says that what this is leading to is the fact that we are alone together. We're on there all the time because we're bored by ourselves, so we interact with people we'll never meet, or we rarely meet. I believe it's one of the principles, is that we too easily put our friends, and there's that word again, ahead of those who are with us. I know it's not everybody's thing right now because of coronavirus, but when you feel comfortable, go to a restaurant and just walk by the tables. What'd you say? Oh. Huh? Oh, okay. I've got a living, breathing human being in front of me. And I'm interacting with somebody who I've probably never met on the other side of the world. What am I doing? And put that in contrast with the description you see. You got a couple references on the screen. Deuteronomy 13:6, 1 Samuel 18:1. Of the true friend is one who you love as your own soul. When I have a living, breathing human being in front of them, they need my attention. You may have heard me say this before in different places, but when Leah and I go on a date, which is Rare right now, but we try. We go out to eat. Our kind of unwritten rule is that I'm allowed to have my phone on the table, and if it buzzes, I can do this. And if it's not the babysitter, it goes right back down. Unless someone calls twice and I figure something bad happens. But if it's not the babysitter, it goes back down. Why? Because I'm with her. And we've got to interact in that way. Let me do one more slide very quickly, because this is actually the end of this section. And I don't want to carry this over to next week. And that is, we will feel people's pain, but we often fail to truly empathize. I see someone's hurting, I know someone's hurting, but I don't really have to interact with them to understand it. It's no wonder we call it a selfie, because that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about me, and again, I'm glad that I know that someone else is hurting, and it's good that I can pray, but because I don't really know that person, that situation, and don't really have to, I lose the ability to really empathize because I can't be with them. I can't go and take food to them or sit and pray with them. They're 900 miles away. And it doesn't really bother me that they're hurting in some particular way. Now, some of these are good, some are bad. Next week, we will dive more specifically into some of this. I know we've kind of jumped back and forth this morning, but I hope you see why. We're trying to lay down some principles of where we're going, because we have got to look at this in a very different way than the people around us do, and not just accept it as just part of life. We've got to accept it as something we use to God's glory. Thank you for your time.